So I call a cab to go to his house, and then I call him and I say, hey, I've got a cab and I'm on the way to your house. We're going to talk. And he said, don't come here. You're no longer welcome here. And I said, well, I'm coming. And he said, if you come, I'm calling the police. And I said, well, go ahead and call them because I'm on the way to you.
All right, welcome back to another episode. This is Feedback with your man, Nick Alfano, and we have a special guest that I have had the privilege of knowing for about a year and a half now. He's actually a member of my program called The Program, and as a result, we've gotten extremely close over the last year and a half. Not only is he like a member, he's probably the member. Like we have these particular members that really show up, I wouldn't say better, but the reality is they show up more consistent than others. They become a lighthouse or a beacon in the community, and as a result, everybody looks to them for all the answers when myself or my coaches aren't available. And he not only shows up for the community virtually or on Zooms or in the app, he comes to almost every live event, doesn't ask for anything, gives me 2.5 days of his life, pours into other men, no questions asked, drops everything, literally just wants to see his brothers win. So this is a very special human being to me. His name is Taylor Ammons, and welcome to the show, brother.
Man, thank you so much, dude. I'm so glad to be here, and I feel like this is a long time coming because I love that feedback is out now. I love that you're doing the things, and I'm so fired up to be doing this beside you.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you that caught that right there, I've been getting a lot of shit because I've been talking about dropping this for probably a year now.
We won't talk about it.
Yeah. We won't talk about it, but we'll talk about it.
We don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm over here preaching things like consistency and get out of your own way, F your stories, just get out there and do the thing. And I've been talking about this podcast, and I do have it's actually worse. I have 20-some episodes banked, which shows part of my programming, which is I need it to be perfect before I launch. I need an intro, an outro, a cool background. I need a cool studio. Like I had to check every box when the reality is, and you know the answer to this, version 1 is better than what?
Version done.
Yep.
Because it's version done.
Yeah. So let's real quick. Let's kind of show these people who you are.
Yeah.
Again, I've kind of talked briefly about why you're so important to me and to this movement. But let's kind of let's go way back. So people, if you're hearing the voice, he gets not a lot of flack for that. He gets a lot of love for that. We've got some grown men in our community that just love to hear Taylor talk. It's kind of creepy. Talk to us about that beautiful accent because we're in Nashville. You live in Nashville, but you're not really a Nashville native. Where are you from?
No, and so I was a military kid, grew up down in Florida, and in around 99 to 2000, my dad got out of active duty, went reserves, was stationed up in North Georgia, and so we relocated up to North Georgia. We're living in a town called Cartersville, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta, and it was an interesting ride, man, because I grew up in a really conventional Christian family. Like we grew up, we went to church, and it was one of those where it was understood that we would go to school, we would get an education, we would go to college, then we would enter the workforce, and we would work in a career. Mine was it's supposed to be military because my dad was military, his dad was military, and it was just assumed. And, I just walked through life that was going to be the phase for me.
Did you want that? So it was part of your lineage, right? The generational thing. But Did you actually at an age, that's where you thought you were headed to, or that's where everyone else thought you were headed?
I would say that's where everybody else thought I was headed to. And it's really interesting because I went through school. I was a BC student. I was one of those that could have been an all-A student, but school was really boring to me. So I was a middle-of-the-road kid, and I always had friends, but I always wanted to be the popular kid. I wanted to be the guy that people saw. And so I used that and started lashing out almost and started rebelling and things like that. And that almost made the military decision a little bit easier.
Sure.
Because it's like, oh, this will give us some structure, And it was literally the day before. I'd been accepted to college, but I had went through taking my ASVAB and was going to leave for MEPS, I want to say the next day. And I had a phone conversation with my mom, and she said, is this really what you want to do? And that was the first time I remember somebody asking
Anybody
me,
asking you, what do you want?
If that was exactly what I wanted to do. And I didn't have an answer for her. And she said, how about this? Go to school, Because she said, frankly, like, I don't really want you involved in what's going on overseas right now. Now, I was going to be going Air Force. I wouldn't have seen near the stuff that, some of our friends have seen. But
what year would this have been?
This would have been '08,
Okay.
and I would have been over there probably '08 to 2010-ish, something, if I would have even went. I don't know. But her recommendation was go to college, try it out for a year, see what you think.
Now, did you have a plan for college, like a quote unquote major picked out, or were you just going to go through GEs and
Man,
FAFO?
it's funny you say that, because when I made the decision to go to college, I knew I was going to go to ABAC, and that was actually Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, so just a little small school in South Georgia in a town called Tifton. And the only reason I wanted to go there is there was a guy named Jono, was short for Jonathan, that went to this, or he grew up on this farm we used to keep horses at. He went to ABAC, he team roped, he was on the rodeo team, and I always wanted to be a part of that. And so
hold on, a part of it how? Like you were going to be
I wanted to
full-blown?
ride bulls or team rope or on the rodeo team down here at this college. And so I made the decision to go to ABAC simply based on that they had a rodeo team that they didn't even have when I got there. Yeah, and then I had to find a degree, and so I'm like, well, I need
Well,
a
hold on,
4
can you major in rodeo teaming and roping and
Nope,
riding 8-second rule?
Nope, no,
Or
you
you just
can't.
wanted to find you a buckle bunny? Is that 'cause that's what
so-
Yellowstone calls it?
That's
so
what
that's the only thing I know.
Hey, it's a thing. It's a thing. But when I was, my parents got divorced in 2001-ish, 2002-ish, and so when I was with my dad, I was always sports, baseball, things like that. When I was at my mom's house, we were always riding horses. I'd be getting to ride these steers, I'd get to rope and do things like that. And so I was really getting to experience two lives, and I was really more passionate about, that country, riding horses, doing things like that, over baseball. But I almost think that was more from probably the way that, because my dad coached me. And so it was one of those that I harbored some resentment, because, I would see my sister where, they were getting horse riding lessons and things like that from these professional trainers. And on the baseball side, my dad's like, I know all that. Like, I can teach you all of that. And then, so when I finally got to work under some professional coaches on baseball, I started getting really good at baseball. But, I was definitely more passionate about, like, doing country things. And
So where did you end up going to school? So you obviously didn't do MEPS. You didn't go the
Nope,
military route.
Yeah, I didn't end up going military route. Went to ABAC.
For how many
and
years?
I was down there about 2 years, and that was where I really realized my first semester I was great. I made Dean's List. I decided on a degree in turf grass management. I made the Dean's List my first semester freshman year. I mean, everything you could have asked for. And then,
So real quick, what was the difference between B&C Taylor in high school and Dean's List Taylor freshman year of college? Less distractions, less desire to be the cool kid. What do you think? Or actually interested in the subject matter? Like, what do you think? Because that's a big. I know you really well,
Yep.
and I think you're one of the smartest dudes I know. So to hear Dean's List or even straight A's is a no-brainer for I think anybody who's ever had a conversation with you. But where's the difference there?
I was serious about it for sure. Like, I wanted that, or at least I thought that I did. And so I took it very seriously. Like, I took chicken scratch notes in class. I went home, recopied those notes back down so that I could have them more legible. Like, if I had OpenAI back then, it would have been game over.
Hold on real quick, because I do want to say something that hopefully you guys are catching. Not only did he take the chicken scratch notes, but then he went home and cleaned them up, or
I would go
summarized
through
them, or made them cleaner, because whatever. This is a huge thing that you, especially you young bucks that are listening, you don't do. Like I had a college professor. His name was Thomas Hudspeth, and he used to say you can't review something that you haven't viewed.
Yep.
And he would basically poke at us because he's like, hey, there's a test coming up. And you guys are saying you're going to review or you have reviewed, but you haven't even looked at your notes that you took day one. So until you view those things, how can you possibly review? And so I just want to point out the guy that made Dean's List actually did the work in the class, went home, did the work at home on the work he did in class. And that's the difference that some of y'all are missing.
Well, and I didn't even realize what I was doing at the time. But, I know now that I'm much further along on my journey that I was getting to experience the class right then and take the notes. But then when I went home and rewrote those, I was continuing to program because I was doing the activity of writing it out. I was continuing to reaffirm those things that I had learned and continue to put those into my mind where they become more ingrained and they're more reflexive. And I didn't realize that, and so I was doing really well.
Yeah, if someone told you that's what you're doing, you probably would
I
stop
would,
doing it.
I would have been like, that sounds.
But that's the problem
really
with these kids
weird.
with AI now is they'll
Yeah.
never experience the actual need to write it down and then rewrite it, clean it up, because like, to your point, you're processing it twice, and if you process it twice, the likelihood of it being sticky and then being able to reflexively recall it when time comes is night and day versus like. People think this tech is like saving them, but it's killing everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and even in today's day, when I leverage AI, I will typically take that and then put it into something where I have to put my own energy and effort into it to perfect it and make it my own. And that's normally writing something out.
Yep.
And that helps to continue to ingrain that. But so again, first semester of freshman year was killer.
Okay, so what happens next semester?
Next semester, I started meeting friends, and then I started getting my dopamine hits from this acceptance that I had so long wanted. And so
high school Taylor that wanted to be popular starts to have the opportunity to be popular freshman year.
Yeah,
second
and then
semester.
was more introduced to drugs, alcohol at a higher level. I mean, we drank a lot growing up. My first arrest from alcohol was at 15, which is kind of unheard of, but nowadays not, because 15-year-olds are ODing and dying from drugs and, being trafficked. Like there's a big, big issue going on with that. But back in my day, it was just we had drank some beer, got in trouble, and got arrested. But when we got off to college, I started realizing by hanging out with the wrong people that these professors don't care if you go to class. They don't care if you come to class smelling like weed. They don't care if you come to class hungover. So I'm like, I'm gonna live. I'm gonna have a good time.
So they can't tell you.
Yeah, I was
hey,
like, we're gonna have
boy."
a good time. And that was where everything began to spiral because it got to the point where I wasn't scared to do anything.
Were you staying on campus or near campus?
I stayed on campus my freshman year, and then we moved off campus. I never technically made it to my sophomore year on credit hours basis, but when we moved off campus was when it really got rocky. Yeah, because I mean, we were already doing pills a lot. We were already smoking a lot of weed. We were already drinking like crazy. But once we got away from the campus and had more access to that,
turn the volume up.
We could turn the volume up.
Real quick, I
want
to ask you this because you touched on briefly. Your childhood was like a typical Christian home.
Yep.
I mean, then obviously there was the divorce, but there was still a heavy presence of mother or father. Mm-hmm. What I noticed when I went to college, I went to UC Santa Barbara, but some of my background. I've been homeless since I was super young.
Yep.
And what I noticed about the kids that grew up with a lot of structure, once you take that away, and you can go at 2 a.m., go do whatever you want. You could stay up late. You can and I hate to say this and come across racial, but a lot of the Asian kids bombed out freshman year. Mm. And some of them had their very first taste of alcohol at 18, 19. Some of them, their parents were so on them, micromanaging their violin lessons to their foreign language class. Like they were so much structure that when they took that off all at once. And so my argument, what I noticed was like the kids that kind of grew up, I won't say loosey-goosey, but it kind of had to figure some things out on their own. They did really well with that freedom, that instant overnight, I'm in the dorms, I'm off campus freedom.
Yep.
And then the kids that grew up with a tremendous amount of structure really struggled to kind of find that balance. And if you take too long to find it, then you can find yourself off campus raging.
Right, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head because it was definitely one of those where, we had our bedtime, we had our allowance, we had all these things. It was a rigid structure, and we 100% had a little bit more freedom over at my mom's house than at my dad's house. And so, I even think that leads to the relationships that we have today because I'm a lot closer to my mom than my dad. And that bums me out, but it's just a simple fact of the matter. We're progressing through this life, and my dad has unfortunately hit a spot where I feel like he's kind of stagnated, and my mom's still pushing. She's wanting to continue to elevate. She's wanting to learn from the things that I'm doing so that she can process through different things. Like she's continuing to lead the way. She got sober and then prayed for me to get me sober. I mean, God has got his hand in our family for sure. And so It's really powerful to reflect on that.
Real quick, to be able to say that out loud, by the way, of I feel like dad's maybe stuck on his journey, but I feel like mom's constantly looking for different ways to level up. Even, so much so that she's even looking to me to see how I'm leveling up. And sometimes as kids, and my daughter's kind of going through this right now. She's came back from college. She went to Bama, Roll Tide, and all that to say, like, I feel like they go through this period where they kind of blame their parents for everything. Like they kind of find a place where it's like this super, I hate to say the word victim mentality, but you were told you are who you are and how you are because of the way you were raised. And then you go process childhood trauma. And it's frustrating because it took me forever to have these type of conversations either with my parents or about them, where you kind of have to realize they were only operating with the tools that they had in their tool belt at the time. The end. And it is frustrating to see that some of them put the tools down and don't want to pick them back up and but also there's grace in the fact that, like, look, that's where he's out on his journey. But it was all benevolent. Like, there's no way most parents, 99.9, ever meant their children harm. And so if they showed up in a certain way or didn't show up in a certain way, it's because they had a certain level of consciousness at that time. They had a tool belt that they probably got from their parents that might be severely limited. And then that's what they go to work with. You know what I mean? It takes a long time to get there and wrap your head around that. And it sounds like you've done a great job with that. So I know now, like, mom works with you, right? Now we can get into, like, how you've transitioned. I don't want to fast forward too much in your journey because I want people to really see that you went from party boy, alcohol. We're going to go through that journey because today is a huge date, by the way. And by the way, I'm going to say this now. For those of you that are only listening on Apple and Spotify, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. He's already going to get red. I've got a lot of friends. We've got a lot of, like, just dudes in the program. Every time I bring Taylor anywhere, every single person, and I can say this because I'm confident in my manhood, everyone says, that's got to be the sexiest mother effer, like, out there. Like, bring him around more. He should be, for example, one thing I'm going to ding you on right now, even though I'm telling everybody that you're awesome looking, is you should be probably further along in your entrepreneur journey if you realize that you could probably walk into any room and get anybody to do anything that you want them to do. And I know you well enough to know you wouldn't manipulate that, but I think you need to step into that a little more, not just because you're good looking, but the way you carry yourself, the way you show up for others. We'll get into that. Let's go back to your story. But if you're on Apple or Spotify, you can't see me pointing, but you can hear me pointing. Do yourself a favor and jump onto the YouTube one. Let's go back to off-campus, partying your brains out. Let's go.
Yeah, and so the house that we had, it was pretty good size, 5 bedrooms, so there's 5 dudes living in there. And, I mean, it was anything from, the parties, the sex, the drugs. I had no respect for women. I had a conversation with my wife recently because that's one of the main journeys I'm going down right now is where did that come from? Because I didn't see that at home. Like, I never knew of any infidelity that might have happened in my younger years. Like, I don't believe any of that existed. If it did, it was never shared. So I don't really realize where I started to sexualize women as much as I did. And it could be just, you don't know how to handle your emotions and things like that. Or maybe it was a way to have acceptance and things like that. But, it was ultimately whatever we wanted to do. But there was multiple times down there in college, and these are stories that my family doesn't even know a lot of times, but there was a few times where I went down to go buy drugs because I had the contacts to the people down in Tifton, and it was in a very rough area of Tifton, but I had a guy that we used to go buy some weed from, and he would short me every time, and I ended up pulling a pistol out on him at like 19 years old, ultimately just to tell him, like, I'm not going to buy weed from you anymore because you keep shorting me. And then he's like, man, I got my gun inside. And I was like, well, that doesn't do you any good out here. And I still didn't think through what I was doing at the time. And then he calls me later and he's like, hey, I've got your stuff. You can come back and get it. And I'm like, bro, I'm not coming back over there.
And it sounds like you tried to have a duel, though, live in the moment, the way I'm hearing it. It's like, I've got my gun, and your gun's inside. You should go get that gun, and we'll walk off 10 paces and see how this goes.
Yeah, no, it was one of those that I don't really know what my game plan was with it. I just knew the gun was coming out just to let him know I meant business. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we had another.
So you didn't go back, though? You didn't fall for the
No, I never even saw that dude again. He could be dead for all I know. Another guy that we were buying some drugs from down there that had a deal almost go sideways. Guns came out, ended up having to leave and just kind of unwind the whole thing. But there's been a lot of situations that I look back on now, and they could have gotten really sour. So I know that there was a hand on me, because there's many times I've been in rooms where weapons probably could have went off, should have went off, and didn't, or been in scenarios where somebody could have been really hurt and wasn't. So I know that there's a bigger purpose for why I'm here.
Come on. I love that. I'd like to talk about that scar on your head, if you're willing to turn to the camera and show the less pretty side of Taylor, because that's a phenomenal story.
Yep.
Let's get into some of that, and then let's just kind of go through maybe the transition to, figuring out your ultimate gift to gab. It probably started with women, but you definitely did well in the car game with it. But talk to me about that gash on your head right there.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can get it. Bam!
Yeah, it's there. It's on camera.
Right back on the back of there. So in 2016, I got 2 DUIs 18 days apart.
Come on.
I was living at home with my mom, and the first one, I was about a half a mile from the house, fell asleep at a car. The police officers in Cartersville knew me by name. So when he walked up, he was literally my neighbor at another apartment complex I lived at. And he walked up and he said, "Taylor, how long you been asleep here?" And I was like, he said 45 minutes. And I was like, all right, well, let's go. And then 18 days later, bam, got another one. And I was on state probation for a gun charge that I caught at 21. And so I was working through all of that. I ended up getting sentenced to a year in the county jail. I had to serve 8. And during that time, I lost one of my best friends, Christian. And he died in a motorcycle wreck. So I carried that burden with me too. And I had about a 5-minute cry session over that. And one of the guys that was going down to prison was like, "Hey, man, dry it up. You've got time to do. Like, there's no time for that here." But my mom had to tell me that over the phone. And that was how I found out. So it was rough. When I got home, I had a good friend of mine named Israel that I moved in with, and he was even like, "I've got you a girl," and she was a young blonde-headed girl, and at the time
Who says
when
that? So is that the people you were like, "I got you a girl"? It's
all
lined up.
Oh yeah, he's
That's
like,
creepy.
I got you a girl lined up when you come home, and so when I got home, all of my friends were doing cocaine. And I had an experience with it in the past, but all my friends were doing cocaine at the time. And so when I got home, we just went right back to the party scene. The night that I got home, I don't even know if everybody knows this story, but I'm going to tell it anyways.
Come on with it.
The night I got home from the county jail, I went to the barber shop to get my hair cut, got cleaned up, went to the house, got dressed, went to the bar. Granted, I had just done 8 months, got 4 months, forgiven, and then went straight to the bar. And then that night, I was walking outside to go smoke a cigarette, and this guy that I was in the county jail with came walking by me, and I was like, "Oh, what's up, Bartow?" Because I recognized him, and he said, "What's up?" Kept it moving right in. I turn around, and he's just wailing on this guy at the bar. And the last person I saw sitting there was my buddy. And so I went right on in. He came out, and I put my hand through his mouth, and it literally split the whole back of my hand open. And he took one step back, smiled at me. His front teeth were folded back, bleeding, and he bull rushed me. And I was like, "Oh, no." And so they end up taking everything to the ground.
He's a big boy?
He was big.
Yeah.
He was big, way too big for me to be messing with. And I take my shirt off, wrap my hand up, jump in the bed of the truck, and I'm trying to get people to like leave because I just got out of jail. And the people I was with, Israel being one, was like, we're gonna stay and talk to the police. And I'm like, hey, I'm about to run. And so I'm laying in the bed of this truck with my hand wrapped up the night I got out of jail from doing 8 months after just putting my hand through this dude's face. And then I got out of that, went home, glued my hand back together, and it was just an absolute nightmare. But I just couldn't fathom, that I still didn't see the issue that I had.
Yeah.
I still didn't see that I was not I was not a good person. And so we were still running around acting a fool, and we had a night that we were out at a bar, and we were on some cocaine, having a good time, and the guy Israel had told me this story about some girls that he had hooked up with. And I knew the girls, and it was at a party. And so I ran into the 2 girls at a bar, and we were all out as friends. And I said, "Hey, I heard y'all had a nice night the other night." And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, the three of y'all. And they were like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about.
His hand gestures, he's insinuating potentially a threesome. That's
Yeah.
what's happening right
Yep.
now.
And so I literally threw my hands up, turned to Israel in front of this whole bar, and I was like, why are you always fucking lying about shit? And he was like, what? And I said, you didn't have a threesome with these two girls in front of all these people. And he just flipped out. And he goes to leave. I jumped on the side of his truck because I'm like, hey, we're boys. Like, let's talk about this. We're both twacked out of our gourd. And then he drives off. I fall off his truck, roll. At this point, I'm a little mad, too.
By the way, this is not the head injury yet, just the falling off a truck and rolling.
Correct. Yeah, this leads to the head injury. And then, so I call a cab to go to his house. And then I call him and I say, hey, I've got a cab and I'm on the way to your house. We're going to talk. And he said, don't come here. You're no longer welcome here. And I said, well, I'm coming. And he said, if you come, I'm calling the police. And I said, well, go ahead and call them because I'm on the way to you. That way they can be there. And when I got there, he had all of my stuff set out on the carport. I don't know how he did it so fast because he had everything nice and
cocaine's a hell of a drug, bro.
Man, he was on it. And so I get there, walk up to the door, knock on it, no answer. I call his name, no answer. And I was like, you know what? I'll replace his door. So I took a step back, boom, kicked right under the doorknob, kicked his door wide open. And took 3 steps into his house, called his name, and he bum rushed around the refrigerator. And he had it was either a nightstick or a pipe, maybe 16 inches long, and he cracked me right here. And there's still a knot on my forehead. And when he cracked me there, I kind of locked up and started going down. Then he cracked me across the back of my head twice. And it was almost, did you play GoldenEye back in the day on Nintendo 64?
Yeah, very familiar.
You know when you got killed and the blood like ran down the screen? I saw that. So I was laying on the floor and it was almost like an out of body experience because like it was really echoey in there. And I remember thinking, if he hits me one more time, I'm dead.
Lights out, yeah.
Because I just knew. I was like, oh, because I couldn't move. I was locked up. And I could see the blood running out from under my head. So I knew I was leaking good. And I had a burst of energy. And I got up and I said, one of us will die in this fucking house and it's not going to be me. And I just went at him. And then, so we start tussling a little bit. And then I turn around because I see blue lights outside. So I'm like, well, this is over. So I go walking outside and I'm holding the back of my head because at this point I could feel the blood running pretty well. And the cop came walking up and I was like, hey, can you call me an ambulance? And he goes, whoa, 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 like what's going on? And I was like, I don't have anything to say to you. Can you call me an ambulance? And he was like, well, yeah. So he went ahead and called it in. And then he was like, well, we got to figure out what's going on here. And I was like, are we under arrest? And he was like, I don't think so. And I was like, all right, well, I don't have anything to say to you. I just need my head looked at. So he goes inside. He had a past. I had a past. And so ultimately they just ruled it as, hey, these guys just had a little tussle. And then EMS gets there and they start looking at my head and they're like, how are you getting to the hospital? And I was like, do I need to go? Is it that bad? And he's like, well, I'm looking at your skull. I want to make sure it's not fractured. And I was like, well, based on the circumstance, can y'all give me a ride? And they're like, yeah, come on with it. And so I end up like posting on social media, like flipping birds, taking selfies from the back of the ambulance about like, I'll see you when I get out, and just not thinking. And
so even that near-death knock upside the head times 2
Yep.
was not enough for you to be like, I mean, obviously right there in that moment, you're not in your right mind, but.
Right. Well, and what ultimately came out of that is a lot of these people I was running around with back in the day started coming out of the woodwork because I started getting text messages and DMs from people that I haven't talked to in a long time since I was running around with people that carried weapons and certain color bandanas, and you know that from California.
Yeah, buddy.
I mean, I was getting calls from people I didn't really know how to respond to. Yeah, I mean, they wanted to go get some.
What that ambulance ride cost you, if you don't mind me asking?
I want to say it was probably $1,500 or something like
bad.
that. Nah, not too bad.
I was in Cali once and I got stabbed in the face. My brother and I both got stabbed. We got cool little twin markings. And,
that's something to write home
similarly
about.
situated, running with horrible people. Actually, just had my first daughter. But I remember being coherent enough to be like, I don't have insurance. I'm not getting in that. It was like it was a $5,000 ticket.
Oof.
Everyone knew that with ambulance in Cali. So I was like, I'm just gonna go in the back of my buddy's pickup truck and I'll meet you at the hospital. Because when I get to the hospital, I can play broke dick and they can give me some sort of like state aid, but they don't ever cover the transportation. I'm like, I'm not. That's a $5,000 ride.
Right.
Like, I'll see you there.
And as small of a town as Cartersville is, when I got wheeled into the ER, one of my good friends was in the ER at the time. He's an ER nurse, and he looked over. He's like, Taylor? And I was like, what's up, man? He's like, what happened? I was like, I need some staples. And he was like, I've got an intern. Do you care if he does it? And I was like, bring him on. I was like, I'm high. I didn't care. And I even tell my wife to this day, I'm like, staples are the best. I didn't feel a thing. And she was like, honey, you were high on cocaine. Of course you didn't feel anything. So it was wild. But again, back to those calls that I was getting.
So when was the wake up moment? So you've obviously been through some crazy stuff. Partied your brains out. I want to talk a bit about today because today's a very special day for you.
Yep.
And the only way you get to today is at some point you had to wake up from the pipe beatings and the poor choices and running with the wrong crowd.
Yep.
Can you pinpoint it? Do you have is there like a, I call mine my man in the mirror moment, but do you have like this like pivotal,
Yeah, 100%. You would think that it would have been the pipe, but then I had a cocaine addiction a few years after that lasted 8 or 9 months, where I ended up sleeping in my car, using old clothes for like snot rags because I had so much blood coming out of my face. And that was like a year and a half after that other incident. So, and that wasn't even the moment. And so,
are you doing the car sales by now, or because I know that's a big thing in the sales world in general, but car sales and cocaine is kind of like, I think it's like part of the starter kit when they sign you up.
It kind of was, but I was one of those that I couldn't use and function. So like I was doing weird stuff. Like when I would use at the dealership, I would like go out and put license plate brackets on all the vehicles because I needed to do something. But when it came time to dealing with a customer, I was so focused on that next hit, like I couldn't do it. And so it was one of those, I definitely wasn't.
So you were less active when you did car sales?
Yes.
Okay. Because it didn't serve you, because you were losing money.
Correct. I was big on pain pills when I was selling cars. Pain pills, Adderall, things like that, stuff that I could flow on.
Yep.
But no, it was ultimately the drinking that did it for me, because I was engaged to my now wife, and while we were engaged, when I was in my cocaine addiction, I kept receipts for everything. And she had suspected some foul play with some like prostitutes when I was in Warner Robins down there, and I had lied about it. And her and I were going through some receipts, and she found a receipt from some condoms that were purchased.
I thought you were going to say she found a receipt for a prostitute. And that was
No. Yeah, no, I don't think they do those things.
I mean, it's
They're
technology
just cash
now.
only, you know what I mean? But she had found that receipt, and that's when I actually had to open up about it, about what was going on. And that ultimately, that, and then starting my own business, I was just drinking so much. And, for about 3 months before I got sober, I would like projectile throw up for usually hours every morning I woke up. So anywhere between 45 to 60 minutes up to 2 hours, I would be puking when I woke up. And it went on for about 3 months, and then I was down at RoofCon, and we were supposed to do a meet and greet with Ed Milet and John Maxwell that day at the conference. It was one of the two. I think it was Ed Milet. And I started getting sick, and my old business partner was like, hey, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, man, this is normal. It happens for the first few hours I'm awake. And he's like, that's not really normal, dude. And he was like, how long has this been going on? And I was like, about 3 months. And he said, how much are you drinking? And I said, well, I'll normally pick up a 12-pack on the way home and a 1 liter of Tito's and a gallon of cranberry juice, and I'll drink the 12-pack. I'd usually leave like 3 or 4 for Loyal. She would have a cocktail. I would drink the rest of the liter of Tito's, and I would leave about 2 shots in the bottom of the bottle, because that's what would stop my throw-ups. And he goes, bro, like, we gotta get some blood work done on you or something. So when we got back from RoofCon, I went to a little walk-in clinic where they would draw blood. You gave them like $50 and they'd do a blood panel. And 3 days later, she calls and says, hey, can you come in to review these blood panels? So I go in, she hands me the blood panels and says, can you take these to Vanderbilt's walk-in clinic and let them look at them? And I was like, yeah, I mean, is there something like wrong? And she was like,
She's like, you're
well,
a science experiment.
she's
We
like,
need to study this liver.
Yeah, she's like, your liver and kidney levels are off the charts. She's like, I'm afraid you're in kidney failure right now. And I was like, oh. And then it starts making sense. And at the time, I'm probably 215 pounds. We've got some pictures. I'm so inflamed, I didn't realize, like, I wasn't processing out any toxins. And then, so I go to Vanderbilt's walk-in clinic. They do blood work. They come back and say, we need you to go check yourself into Vanderbilt downtown at the ER. So I go from walk-in clinic to Vanderbilt walk-in clinic to I'm going to be admitted to the emergency room. And same thing. They go through and do blood work. Ironically enough, this guy that's 2 beds over from me, I also didn't realize Vanderbilt is a trauma hospital. There was shit everywhere back there. Like, I mean, people on gurneys with just blood. And I'm like, I'm in there just hammered, because my body's shutting down. And there was a guy in there with me that he led some recovery groups. And the doctor came in and he was like, hey, man, so here's where you're at. The longer you're not drinking, your liver and kidney levels are slowly returning to normal. So it lets us know you're not in kidney failure or anything like that. But if you don't have a plan to stop drinking, it will 100% kill you.
100, not
100.
89,
It was
99.
This will kill you. This will kill you. And they didn't have a time frame. It's just like, hey, if you continue drinking like this, you will die.
So you get that news, the news of a lifetime, which is
Yep.
is harder to process than the pipe hit over the head.
Yep.
You're next to a guy in the bed who specializes in walking people through recovery.
Yep.
You use the word, I think, coincidence. Or you use the word that I don't like because I think we have a favorite word we like to say here, which we got from our good friend Double D.
Godquence.
God sequence. He calls it a God sequence.
Yeah, God sequence.
So God sequence.
Yep.
And so I think we can all agree, and for my people listening, and I know you agree, that God was like, all right, I need like a double whammy. We got to he's got to get this news, be faced with a decision, and then have the answer to that decision right next to him. Because if I don't create the ultimate sequence for him to win, he's going to find a way to F this up again.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And not only that, about 6 months before that, I met Bubba.
Come on.
And so Bubba was living his sober life. And I was even like kind of engaging in some conversations about, I was kind of curious about it. I'm like, hey, my mom is in recovery. My mom's working a program. Like, my mom's life is so much
that's God
different.
priming the pump, so you'll be more receptive to it.
And so, I mean, dude, literally when the doctor said, after like this dude next to me leads recovery groups, I'm in here like body shutting down, and then this doctor's like, you are going to die. He's like, what's your plan? And he was like, and I was like, what do you mean? And he said, what's your plan? Because if you don't sell me on what your plan is, you're not leaving. And so he was going to admit me. And I said, I've got a good friend of mine, Larry Richards, that I'm going to reach out to. He's in recovery. He's in a program, and I'm going to have him walk me through this. And he was like, okay. And then so I was honest about all that. And
when was the date? So obviously, what's today's date?
Today's January 23rd. This was in November.
Okay.
So we got a little delta here.
Yeah, yes. There's a little gap before you got serious.
And so I made it 97 days.
Okay.
And relapsed. I went on the road with some high school friends, and we made it one day and then started drinking. But I was not authentically living in my sober self. I was trying to get sober without anybody knowing that I had a problem. So I was coming from a place of shame, and I wasn't owning the fact that this was simply a moment of my life that paved the way for the new me to be able to emerge. Like, I had to go through all of those things. I had to experience all of that, everything that I had to experience. And I used to look back on this with a lot of shame about the decisions I made. And then it dawned on me the other day that I was looking through some stuff that I'm working on, and I was looking at all the different versions of it. And every version I looked at, from the first version to like the 5th version that I'm on now, every version to me was beautiful because I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into each version of that. And then it dawned on me, God did the same thing for me at every single phase, at every single point when I thought, why is this happening to me? It was to prime me for the next level. I had to go through all of those things because it's proven that you can't fucking break me. There's nothing that you can do that's going to push me off course. We're going to go at everything with all that we have because there's too much on the line at this point. And at this point now, there's too many people looking at me wondering if I'm going to pull this shit off, if I'm going to stay sober, if I'm going to be able to stay on this track that I'm doing.
But to be able to look back at your past, as checkered as some people might want to say it is,
Yep.
to be grateful for it, to actually sit in this chair right now, 3 years sober, by the way, that's what we were getting to. Today is the actual date, and we just scheduled this thing randomly. And then he comes in literally right, like maybe a half hour before it, you text him, you're like, hey, by the way, this is my 3 years. So that's super powerful. But what I'm saying is, for you to be able to sit in this chair right now and literally express, I can feel it, gratitude for all of those decisions, good, bad, ugly, and different. That to me, that's the difference. That's why you're winning right now, because most people can't. We can all look back, and even if it's something as simple as you're going through this book of things that you've been working on, a lot of us would look at version 1 and kind of talk shit on it. But it's beautiful, because again, that's where I was on my journey right there, and that was 100% me, unapologetically Taylor, right there on that paper. And then version 2, version whatever. So yeah, man, that's a powerful revelation.
Yeah, it just absolutely floored me, man, because I used to look back on all these sections and decisions that I was making and was like, why did I do that? And I would beat myself up. Then once I really let all of that go and truly understood that this was all planned out, like all of that had to happen for me to be where I am today. And once I can be grateful for all of that, it has no more power over me.
That's it right there.
It has no more power over me. Nobody can say shit to Taylor Ammons. Nobody can pull up anything about my past because I've talked about everything on a podcast. And I'll talk about everything in front of my family, in front of God, in front of my wife. There's nothing people don't know. And when people figure that out, they're absolutely unstoppable. Absolutely unstoppable. I'll die on that hill.
I saw a quote maybe a year ago, and it still like comes up once in a while when someone wants to bring up my past, and it's like, man, that's like bringing up my past is like trying to rob my old house. Like, I don't live there. That's not my shit no more. You know what I mean?
Cares?
So like, it's always like a funny little joke that I like to say in my head. But it's obviously what you're saying is 10x more powerful than that corny line. But that line just sits with me because it's like, like that's old me, man. And by the way, that old me birthed this version that you're seeing right here. So come on, let's have that conversation because I'm willing to have it.
Well, and to your point, I'm looking back at all these versions and the growth that I've made, even over the last few years. And then I start realizing I've got like 55 more of these in me, at least. And I'm like, bro, the compound effect of that, from showing up, doing the work, and letting momentum and compound interest take the wheel and surrender that God's got this figured out. I just have to move in his will, and I have to keep his will in front of me and aware of that. And I have to be aware of the old thoughts that are going to lead to the old belief patterns that are going to create the actions of the old Taylor that I don't want, that create the emotions of guilt and shame.
But one thing you did by giving yourself grace, again, and basically forgiving yourself, and hold on a second, little mini error in the background there. This happens when we run too long. This means we've been talking too long. I'm gonna fix the timer on that. One thing that happens as a result of giving yourself grace, and I think a lot of people do fail to, I wouldn't say forgive yourself, but just accept with gratitude all these versions of you. When that talk track comes back up and old Taylor comes back up, like the worst thing you can do is kind of pretend that version of you doesn't exist or never existed, because that's your shadow self. And once you try to like wrestle and say, oh, that version is dead, that version's long gone, no, that version's very much alive and kicking. He's still there. For example, like you have to stay every day, like, hi, my name's Taylor, I'm an alcoholic. Like we've wrestled with this before, and we can talk about it for a second live on this podcast, but I used to have a huge issue with that because I feel like from a programming standpoint, they're programming people that are no longer alcoholics to still own the fact that they're alcoholics. But what they're really doing when I started to unpack it is you're really acknowledging shadow self, because what we resist persists. And the minute you try to put that version of you in a box, you're giving it a lot of power. And so you can't say that version is not still there. You can't say at some point that version is not going to have a conversation with you. You just got to make sure you're powerful enough to calm them down. And to completely denounce that part of you is gone forever is to give it so much power.
Right.
I think that's where people kind of
Yep. But I love that you brought this up, because some of the work that I've been doing recently, I actually went to an AA meeting on New Year's Day because I wanted to kick the year off right. And when I was in the meeting, I called my mom right after, and I was like, I'm done.
Oof.
I was like, I'm done with AA meetings. I said, it was just a sob fest of all of the things that they wish they had and all of this, that, and the third. And I was like, everybody in there was saying the same thing. Hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. Hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. I'm like, this can't be good on your cognitive function.
Yeah.
I'm like, it can't be. I'm like, we're reiterating. I'm like, we're counting these days. What are we counting? Are we counting how many days it is until we fucking relapse again? Like,
and
no.
that's the juxtaposition with the fact that you're on
Yep.
you're 3 years, so 365 times 3. I
Yep.
don't feel like doing the math. Like, and you get the token, and that represents a day. But the more you count it, it's like you're counting. Like, why? Just stop counting.
Correct.
Because your new identity is I'm just not that
Yep.
dude. Like,
Yep.
I'm not the dude. So
Yep.
like I don't have to count anymore because it's never happening ever again. Versus I'm on day 1400. But 1401 could be crazy.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
again, this is tough for me because I still go back and forth with, and we've had a lot of conversations around this.
Yep.
The fact that they commit you to that sentence, is it doing more harm than good? I don't know.
Yeah. Now,
You know?
and then we can talk about this on a whole nother episode, but the book of Alcoholics Anonymous was created when there was still a principle behind the Newtonian principle and not the quantum understanding that we have now.
Number one, Taylor's a professional salesman, so you're watching him sell himself on a future episode of this podcast because he's always be closing Taylor Ammons. But yeah, for the record, one of my favorite conversations to have with you, because you're the only one that likes to go down this rabbit hole with me, is quantum physics.
Yep.
And understanding that, Newtonian principles have long since died.
Long gone.
And quantum is actually called the one true science, is quantum physics, because there's no way to refute it. But it freaks people out because it's still kind of woo-woo, because it's still kind of new. It's just not mainstream because it really debunks a lot of shit that we all grew up with, and it freaks people out. And so it's one of those things that they're keeping under wraps unless you know. But you the further down that rabbit hole you go, it's like, oh my God, this is the truth.
Oh, yeah. Well, and not only that, it's so liberating because you realize that, like, holy cow, I'm not only the painting, but I'm the painter as well. Like, I have control to change all of this.
You're going to lose everybody with this one.
and my brain's cool with it. Like, we're not stuck in the ways that we were in before, and so, but it comes down to, I have to change the way I think so that I can create a new belief system so that it can support my actions that can reinforce the identity that I'm creating, which is ultimately who I'm stepping into now. Is, I have a voice in my head for every different emotion, but I'm starting to realize that I don't have to give power to those voices or emotions when they come up.
Boom.
I can live in happiness. I can be grateful. I can be grateful that I had a bad day.
But you can also experience pain if you choose to. You can experience
100%.
loss. You can grieve. That's, I think, like, one of our favorite sayings in the program is experience my experience.
Yep.
And just sit with that shit. Like, what, like, right now it's been like 6 degrees lately.
Yep.
But what is cold?
Yep.
Like, what is cold? Cold is what you label it. Like, when you literally start to realize that your version of 6 degrees has been programmed and painted by everybody else out there, then you're gonna put a label on 6 degrees. Now, of course, is there physiological things that can happen at 6
Right.
degrees? Yeah, you could probably lose your toes if you just go dancing in the snow. But what I'm saying is, like, so many people just instantly attach a label to a thing versus just feel it, just experience. Like, you're supposed to experience grief and sadness. Like, people run from those things. They're scared shitless of them, but just sit in it.
Yep.
There's so much beauty in sitting in that and,
Oh, yeah.
and choosing it,
Yeah,
So-
it just makes life more real.
Yeah.
And when you do sit in some of those more painful emotions, then you can also start to realize that, oh, some of my thoughts and actions are leading me to feel this way. So let's start doing some work on that to move some of these things out that don't serve me anymore so that I can reduce how often I feel this
Yep.
way.
Or at least have complete control over it. If I choose to step
Yep.
into sadness, grief, sorrow, etc., obviously you do want to always avoid. If you guys have ever seen, the name escapes me, but it's the vibrational frequency cone,
Oh,
right?
yep.
Of like what type of particular emotions emit a certain frequency, and you always want to be vibrating at the highest. And the lowest on the scale is shame and guilt. The highest are peace, love, joy is one, and there's a big difference.
Authenticity, I think, is the highest or
often,
something.
like, it's just really like enlightenment's the highest.
Yeah, oh,
but
yeah.
It's really, the question becomes, like, are you choosing, because people don't realize at a subconscious level, you're choosing shame and guilt. Like, you're choosing to vibrate at a frequency that it just attracts more shit, which then compounds and perpetuates more shame and guilt. and you don't realize you're choosing it, because you would never say out loud at a conscious level, right? If we're operating from the prefrontal cortex, if we want to get super nerdy, you don't wake up and say, I choose shame.
Yep.
I choose guilt. But subconsciously, the way you're showing up in this world, you are choosing that every single day. People choose depression. Mm-hmm. It's insane to me. Like, they choose to be miserable and then attract more misery. And like, I still like, I don't know. It's a whole other topic. We'll have to go crazy on that one.
Oh yeah, because that's definitely one that can go all the way down on the rockers. Because I mean, you said it exactly right. I mean, your 5% conscious mind is not saying these things. It doesn't believe it, but your 5% conscious mind is not going to override the 95% that's running everything.
Yep.
Ever.
All right, so let's go back to the man, the myth, the legend. Raised in a Christian home, all the boxes checked, everything he needed was there. Decides not to go, father and grandfather's route of military, goes off to the crazy school to learn how to do turf management or something.
Yep.
So you're a landscaper now. Then decides, girls and alcohol and drugs are the route. Finally wakes up when the doctor at Vanderbilt says, convince me you have a plan.
Yep.
Because if you don't convince me, number one, you'll die. Number two, I can't even let you out of my sight. God puts the right people in front of you and next to you and around you.
Yep.
You commit to that. As we sit here today, you're 3 years sober. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are you up to now? What is Taylor doing right this minute? I know you've made a transition from like this ultimate gift to gab car salesman to running your own business and helping other people win. Just talk to me about what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so obviously when I got on my sobriety journey, I'd already started my roofing company, and so I was in it. I was in the thick of it, and now we're at the point of scale. And so last year I had the plan on doing that, but I was not the person to execute that. I thought I was, and I had to fall flat on my face, and I made some decisions that cost us over $500,000. And, those are all things that I had to learn from, but those things had to happen for me to be ready for this next venture, which is going to be, we will scale, and it's going to be beautiful, and partner up with some guys potentially on a roll-up to be able to really start building a really nice franchised model.
So talk to the guys real quick about a roll-up, because you're sneaking in words. That, again, the bulk of my listening audience is entrepreneurs, so most of them might get that, but even entrepreneurs, depending on where they're at in their journey, like fruit roll-up? Like, what's my man saying?
Yep.
So what do you mean when you say roll-up?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a company out there, and there's a lot of people that are doing it, but ultimately private equity is doing its thing in the roofing space right now and in home services in general. So some of these companies that have been a little more well-established are almost rolling like a hub and spoke type model. So you're going to have a more larger company that's going to fit in the middle, and they're going to find smaller companies like me to plug into so that they can...
Smaller like revenue or just size of people?
Yeah,
or?
1 to 3 million guys,
Okay.
Guys that are a little bit smaller. Your bigger company might be 8 to 10 million, but then the ultimate goal is to raise the overall valuation of the company to where your main hub makes more money off of the exit, but then you also bring some people along with you that get to exit as well. You build a larger company that can serve more people.
Yeah, and the aim would be we've got now locations in major metropolitan areas.
Correct.
Like we look like a national brand because for all intents and purposes, we are.
Yep.
We've got a system that worked for this bigger company. We deployed it to these other smaller guys. By the way, you guys have maybe heard me say this, but this will scare some of you. 1 to 3 million in revenue, that's where business goes to die.
Yep.
Like you cannot stay there for very long. Most companies, if they get to 1 to 3 million and they keep hitting that ceiling, they've got about 3 years on them, and then they're done. You have to get out of that pocket, or you're going to wind it down and give it up. I'm telling you right now, I can give you the statistics on this. It's crazy. So I think what you're doing is a great move because you're kind of right at that 2 or 3 year mark of kind of beating your head against 1.5, 2, 2.5. So I'm excited for you in this position. But yeah, I wanted the audience to kind of understand what you're doing. So maybe, because maybe you're stuck at 1 to 3 and you're like, I don't know what to do. Cool. Maybe look at what it might be, to get with somebody that's doing bigger and better than you. And that's going to require checking your ego. That's going to require going, you know what? I might not be the dude to take this to 15, 20 mil by myself. Mm-hmm. That's a big pill to swallow, by the way, because as male entrepreneurs, we think we're Superman and we can do it all. We think we can go from solopreneur to massive scale and do all the things. And it's okay to say, you know what, I've got a particular lane that I'm phenomenal at. Yours is sales and training sales. What would it look like to team up with an absolute ops machine that does all the OpEx? What would it be like to someone's got the systems and processes, and I just show up in my zone of genius. Mm-hmm. And if my end game was always to get a $10 or $20 million check by year 5, well, I can get there this route. Or I can keep saying I'm the man and then never get there and possibly shut the doors on this thing.
Yeah. Well, and that was the biggest thing that I had to process through is the ego play of like, I feel good that I can do this. But then if we understand the time constraints that are on this too, private equity is only going to be involved in roofing and home services until they get a large enough hold on the market that they can do what they want to with it. And that time's going to be coming to an end sooner rather than later. They're predicting at least 3 to 5 years, but they can't really look much more beyond that. And it's one of those situations where if we didn't, and then decided to go scale, and then we decide to stay hitting at 2 million because we can't get out of our own way, then we look like idiots.
Yeah.
Because we could have done something bigger. And the other thing is, I'm 35. Paragon's the first LLC that I've started. If we end up working together a roll up and it turns into an exit, we put a couple $1 million in the bank, I can bless the people that were on the road with me, and I can step into the next thing in
as
late,
a completely
in my
different
late
entrepreneur, by the way.
30s, early 40s. Yeah, as a completely different entrepreneur. Dude, get out of the way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm coming because I've got a lot of life left. And so, I heard Brennan Burchard say it not too long ago. He was speaking at a Kiwanis event, and it was one of his first big speaking events, like 8,000 Kiwana members there. And he said it was the biggest stage he'd ever been on. And he thought in that moment that it was the biggest thing he was ever going to experience. And now, Brendan Burchard, speaking to millions of people, impacting millions of lives. He's best friends with some of the top speakers in the world. And he looks back and he's like, I thought that was such a big moment in my life, and it was such a small stepping stone to where I am today. And so I sit with that. I'm like, Paragon, everything that I'm doing right now is a stepping stone for what's to come next. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to show up and give my best in everything that I'm doing today. I'm going to execute. I'm going to keep the momentum going, and then I'm going to rinse and repeat tomorrow. And I'm going to continue to level up each and every day. We're going to have an exit. We're going to move on to bigger and better things. We're going to impact men. We're going to grow people and help them get the heck out of their own way.
Damn. Mic drop. Mic drop right there.
Bam.
By the way, shout out to Brendan Burchard. Every time I hear a guest that hasn't been on this podcast that I want to grab, I'm just going to mention their name. We'll end up tagging them in this clip.
Oh, yeah, please.
Our good buddy, we have a very mutual friend who actually officiated your wedding. So just call him up and say, who's this Nick Alfano guy, and why on earth should I be on his podcast? So maybe we can land Brandon Burchard as a result of that.
Come on, Brandon.
Come on now. Come on, get out here and do this thing.
Yeah, it's not
by
bad.
the way, I'm being bougie about this. I don't want any virtual guests. I refuse to do Zoom podcasting. Come to Nashville. We'll show you a good time. Sit in the seat, and let's do it face-to-face. We're going to wrap up here in a minute. I do have one question that I don't tell you ahead of time because I don't want you to have some eloquent, well-articulated, possibly ChatGPT to answer. So here it goes. What does that word behind my big old head, like what does it mean to you? What comes up when you hear or say the word feedback? And then more importantly, like how do you actually leverage it or process it? Take your time.
That's an awesome question. So I know with me, when I see the word feedback, it's asking for someone to give you their true, authentic feelings about whatever it is. And so, where I'll typically try and leverage feedback the most is at home with the people I love, with the people that are in my circle, with the guys that hold me accountable, is if I'm showing up and I'm operating at a certain level and I'm not taking time for either self-reflection and feedback on if I'm actually moving the needle, but I don't love to do that because you'll lie to yourself. You'll fluff where you're actually at. If you go take a step further and ask somebody that you've asked to hold you accountable, can you give me some feedback on what I'm currently doing or my current situation? You're asking for them to put your feelings aside and be real and raw with you. And
now, how many people would you say you have in your circle, though? Because that I think that's where people would be mistaken. Most men run in circles where, A, they're afraid to ask for feedback, but even if they did, that dude is going to hold back. He's going to hold back that, we call it a gift, but he won't punch his brother in the face. He won't tell him what he's really feeling and just deliver facts, not feelings. And we need those facts, and it should hurt. It should sting a little.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you don't have a buddy that'll pull your card, you don't have a buddy.
Nope.
The end. So my question to you would be, I know you're in our group, so we've got them, but like realistically, maybe before you join our little program gang, do you, besides like loved ones, and even loved ones, again, they have your feelings. They feel like they have your best intentions in mind, but they won't. So they will pull punches.
Yep.
Do you feel that you have a circle of five absent the program? Like, do you feel like you have those people in your life, or you've maybe developed that network over time? Or?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've developed that now. A few years ago, absolutely not, because the people I would have been going to feedback on would be the ones that would justify why it was okay to sneak around, why it was okay to have some lunch drinks, I mean, all those people. So I had to change my environment for me to even be able to change. I had to get out of the circle. I had to get rid of friends. I had to change my phone number. I had to create a new life. I had to become a new version of myself, because everything in my life in those times when it was just chaos and turmoil were not serving me. And if I was ever going to stand a chance to change, I had to get out of that environment, because the feedback that I would have gotten at that time would have kept me in that place, because misery loves company.
Do you think, like how like, because I know you at your core, and I know you're a giver, and typically, like, go givers versus go getters. Like, a go giver has a hard time asking for help, and so do you find that your journey with this concept of feedback, it's been difficult to ask for? Have you gotten better at it? You know what I mean? Like, it's not easy to say, hey, can you kind of check me? I don't know. I think I might be acting a fool, or I might be out of line, or I don't really know where I am, because I might bullshit myself. I'm really good at that. Just asking for feedback is a monumental task for most men. The end, right? So, like, can you just discuss kind of like maybe the journey on that, because that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely took some time, but the biggest thing that I've realized is the most masculine, manly men, tough, rugged, know when to ask for help. I mean, I think the most manly thing that people can do is tell a brother, hey, I'm not okay.
Which goes against what
society says we should do. Like, we should be tough. We should carry these burdens. Like, we don't cry. We don't do any of this stuff. Feel all of that. Like, when not only are you a man when you can deal with your emotions, but not only that, like, control those, like, not let anything just slip by you willy-nilly. Like, you're a man because you're not only in control of your life, but you're in control of your emotional state. And so, I mean, guys have got to understand that when you do decide to break free from that and be vulnerable, then all of the things and the fears that you have no longer hold that power anymore. So the second you can break those walls down, even if it's, with a therapist or something like that, but the second you can begin to realize that it's okay to not be okay, that's when you can begin to change.
Start changing. Yeah, 100%. And to your, you use the V word loudly. Most people, the word manly man and vulnerable don't belong in the same room, but the reality is they couldn't be, better suited for one another. And I think that's where a lot of men have it twisted, is we're told, you're a protector, you're a provider, shut up, push that down, don't you cry, nope, you don't get to share emotions, shove it down, don't do it, pay the bills, figure it out, provide for everybody, put everybody first, and then there's a reason why, suicide rate is 87% male. Because all we do is shove everything down until one day we can't process this shit anymore. We don't feel like we have an outlet. We think to be vulnerable is to be sissy, is to not be a man. And then we erupt. And then we really do damage on our loved ones. And then we really do damage on ourselves, And so, yeah, man, I love and honor, like, watching your journey. I love that I've been a part of your journey for a year and a half now. I don't see us going anywhere. So I want to thank you for coming out. I think your assessment of feedback was real, raw, and relevant, which is all I could ever hope for. Do you have anything vital that you want to share with the audience, like a sign off? If you have anything going on, I always want people to be able to plug themselves on our podcast. So I don't know if people are looking for a roof right now or what you have. I don't know what you have going on, but that's the camera to do it. You're welcome to do it. I don't know what you got going on.
Yeah. I would probably say the biggest thing, obviously, if you need a roof in Nashville, Paragon is your go-to company. We're going to have your back. We're going to look out for you. We're going to make sure everything's done right. But for the men that are listening in on this, the biggest piece of advice that I can lead with is, if you're struggling to change whatever it is that you're wanting to change, whether it's the emotions that you're struggling with or anything like that, it has to start with reprogramming the thought tracks that you have, because those thoughts are going to help reiterate the beliefs that you have, which are going to make those actions so much easier. If you're trying to just create new actions, but you haven't gone deep enough into changing your thoughts that create the belief patterns that support those actions, you're going to continue to stay in the cycle. So that's where a group like the program can come into play, because it can help men not just get to the action part, but can step back and reprogram their thoughts,
do the work that
to
actually,
create more beliefs that then make those actions easier, and people aren't white knuckling.
Shout out to Taylor for using his opportunity to plug my program. No, but also Paragon Roof. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to get a roof anyway, and it's a need usually, right? Unless you just bougie and you like swapping out your roof every year. Like, go with a human being that's genuinely a good human being. Like, I think you can see just by listening to this man for the last hour and change, like where his heart is, where his energy is. And if he pours even an ounce of that into the way he shows up for his team, for your, facilitating your roof, et cetera, like it's a no-brainer. If you've got 3 different people to choose from and now you know this man, it's a no-brainer. Let's do it. So my name's Nick Alfano. This has been another Powerful episode. Thank you for hanging out, Mr. Taylor Ammons. And that's a wrap. We'll see you on the other side.